Okay, so a bit of backstory here. I'm 19 now, but was around 4 or 5 at the time. My parents used to be nudists when I was small, and would encourage me and my brother, 7 or 8 at the time, to accept our bodies, not be afraid to show the skin we were born in, other child teaching stuff like that. They informed me that a lot of their reason for being nudists was because of a very manipulative and persuasive friend they used to have, who was into the practice. They're now extremely embarrassed about their period as nudists, and try to hide the matter from a lot of friends and family. Well, anyway, my dad and mom both worked a pretty stable job in an online accounting firm back then, so we went on holidays quite often. I used to love going to Spain the most, so we chose to go to Spain that summer. On our 10-day trip there, before we headed off to the US for a weekend, we enjoyed going to the beach almost every day. Of course, at the time, my parents loved nudist beaches, not only for the people like them, but also to get a perfect, lineless tan. So we were on the beach, and my dad and brother were splashing around on the shore, while my mother and I were on some sun chairs, her sleeping and me burying my legs in some sand. I didn't really have anything growing on me back then, so nobody paid much attention to me. They did like to look at my mother occasionally though, and when I told her we moved our chairs back to a more secluded part of the beach, where there were less people, she fell back asleep, and next to us were a couple with 2 kids playing behind their chairs, which I thought were their kids. The woman looked at me as I buried my little legs in the sand, and pointed at me, whispering something to the man. She stood up and hung a towel from the sun umbrella above them. He reached into a duffel bag next to him and got out some sunscreen, and started to rub it on a sausage-like thing between his legs vigorously. I know now what it was. He was staring intently at me, and even 14 years later, I remember that odd look of determination but pleasure on his face. He passed the sunscreen to his girlfriend/wife, and she slipped some in between her legs as well. Even at that age, and with my parents being nudists, I felt an instinct that it was not right for them to be staring at me and touching themselves like that. I tried to ignore them and look away, but when I looked back, they were still staring at me. The woman's look was a little softer than the man's, but still really thoroughly creeped me out. What happened next is one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me, and that's saying a lot compared to the other things that have happened to me. The next minute, the woman stopped touching herself and got up. She wiped her hands in area and reached for me, grabbing my arms and shushing me, trying to pull me out of the sand I was buried in. The sand was giving away quickly, and I screamed for my mother. She says I kept going, "Mommy help, Mommy help." I don't remember. It was all a blur to me as my mom got up and yelled, "¿Qué está haciendo?" at the woman. My mom said the woman quickly let go of me, and not in Spanish but in a Northern England accent, which she must have guessed because of the English thing in my mother's Spanish, explained to her that I had buried myself deep in the sand up to my nose, and she thought I was going to slip under, so she had simply pulled me out of concern. The sand underneath me was wet, and from my hips upward, I had not a spot of sand stuck to me whatsoever, so my mom knew she was lying. "Your daughter is very pretty. We meant no harm," the man said, unaware he was still rubbing his nether regions. At that point, my mother loses it. "What the fuck did you just say? And what are you doing to yourself, you disgusting old twit?" The man realized and removed his hand from his inner thigh. "Just sun cream. Keep the old sun from burning me, and just rubbing it in. Do you like hip-hop?" is what I said. My mother reminded him his wife had draped a towel that was blocking all the sun, and he blushed profusely. She spat in the woman's face, got my hand, and dragged me away quickly. We got to my brother and dad, and she told my dad what had happened. He stormed over to the lifeguard and explained to him very shortly the situation. Then he and the lifeguard went to where our stuff was. The couple had taken off, and all that was left were their seats and the 2 kids. My mom scoured through our beach bag for her cell to call the police station, but her phone was missing. So was my dad's wallet. The lifeguard radioed in to the beach kiosk to call the police, and to play on the speakers placed on the bars around that 2 kids were unaccompanied and their parents needed to collect them. In about a minute or so, a woman came running, tears in her eyes, and scooped up the 2 kids. They must have been around 2 years old, and she held them, crying her eyes out. She thanked the lifeguard and my parents, and told us that her husband had fallen asleep, and we told her the couple must have taken them and moved them to their spot. She had her cell in hand and said she was just about to call the police. My mom told her to, and the lifeguard offered to drive us all to the station, including the woman and her husband, as his shift was about to end. We all changed and drove down. In the end, my parents and the nice couple gave their statements. 2 days later, that couple was caught in a hotel, offering kids around a pool sprites that had apparently been drugged. They admitted to being child fetishists, a more complicated word for nasty pedophiles, and were arrested for many charges like child abduction. They were found with a kid in their hotel room, attempted kidnap, child molestation, and trespassing, amongst others. My dad says they were deported back to somewhere near Bradford, but ran away before court was due. I don't know if they're still out there, but creepy, vile couple who hurt kids and upset my childhood? Let's never meet again.
Okay, so this happened to me last night. It was 11:30 p.m. or somewhere around there. This highway was under construction. 1 lane and 2 concrete walls on either side of me. There's a truck in front of me, and I cannot see past him. We're going about 70 miles per hour, and there are no vehicles behind me. He locks his brakes, and I stop. I think nothing of it. I just thought another vehicle stopped in front of him. So we continue on our merry way, and we stop again. I still think nothing of it due to the fact that I cannot see past him. The road widens to 2 lanes, shoulder and regular. I pull into the shoulder to see past him. There's nobody in front of him. I pull back into my lane and he stops yet again, and I thought that was weird. A few minutes of this and he begins weaving in between the 2 lanes. He stops, and I stop. I grab my phone at this point and I dial 911, but I do not press the call button as the truck in front of me begins moving again. Now, I own a Volvo racing vehicle, a V70R, so whenever I get into a situation like this, like traffic start, stop, I put one hand on the steering wheel and one switching gears manually. So I set my phone down to get up to speed, and we get up to 70, and I pick up my phone. And he brakes again at this point, and my phone goes flying across the car. I hadn't clicked call yet, and my phone is in the floorboard somewhere. He starts again, I start again. He stops and starts again after a few seconds, getting up to about 50 before he stops once more. At this point, I think that if there was a car behind me and they rear-ended me, I would go underneath his truck, and that scared me quite a bit. Now I understand that you are wondering why I didn't pass him. I attempted to multiple times while stopped, and he immediately picked up speed and crossed into the lane I was attempting to pass him in. Well, again, he starts, and I start too. We get up to 70. I gain the courage to pass him, and I get halfway up his truck about 3/4 of the trailer before he rapidly turns to the right. Not slowly, not gradually, but extremely fast. So I slam on my brakes, and I cannot slow any faster. If he hits me, I will go into the concrete wall and go airborne, so I am trying to avoid that. I'm about an inch away from taking out my left view mirror. I was that close to the wall. His back tires barely miss me. They were a couple of inches away. Thank God I hadn't gone any faster, and thank God I didn't make it any closer to his cab, because if I did, I wouldn't be here right now to type this. I am quite sure he wanted me dead. I passed him about a minute later, after it split into 3 lanes. So truck driver, who was set on killing me last night, let's not meet.
Back when I was living with my mom, there was this clearly mentally handicapped 40-ish-year-old man living upstairs from us. During the time I'll tell you about, it was 17-year-old me, my mom, and my 7-year-old little sister. Now, my mom was always super creeped out by this man. He had a creepy vibe right off the bat. He looked too long and too hard, smiled too readily, got too close and too personal. But I always took him as harmless. Almost always. I'd go to the pool with friends, and he'd be there and follow us around. He'd ask questions about school and my family, and he'd give me compliments. All the regular creepy stuff. And when I left, he'd leave too. My mom stopped going to the pool. She had a similar experience, apparently. I told her this man was just a little off. He's like a child, that's all. No threat. I stayed out a little late once and was walking home. It was perhaps 2 or 3 a.m. As I crossed through the basketball courts, he greeted me by name and invited me to play with him. I said no, and he begged. I said no again. He followed me a bit and begged some more. I finally said no one more time, and he went home. So yes, he was a creep, but not a threat. He seemed fine, until the day he tried to break into my house. I was babysitting my then-asleep sister, and it was perhaps 11 p.m. Much to my surprise, I hear a knock at the door. It was him, and he was trying to come in. I blocked the entrance and politely but firmly said no. He told me that he was locked out and he really needed to come in. Again, I said no. I explained that we were just kids and we couldn't have any strangers in, but offered to call a locksmith for him. He got a little frantic at this point. He said he was a doctor, so I could trust him. What? I'm 100% sure he was not a doctor. But what a strange thing to say. I told him again, sorry but no, and he said he and my mom were very close friends, and to at least call and ask her. I called my mom, knowing she'd say no. As I did, I told him to wait at the door, and I'd go grab my phone and call. I went to close the door, but he quickly stuck his foot in the doorframe. I yelled at him to move his foot, and he just went to the, "Please, let me in, I'm a doctor," thing again. I tried to kick his foot away, but he stayed firm. Now this is when I took him as a threat. I was worried for me and my sister. I told him to move, and he just ignored it and begged, "Me and your mom are best friends. Please, I'm a doctor, I'm a doctor." I grabbed the door and slammed it on his foot. He pulled back out of pain. He just kept pounding on the other side, begging to come in. I called my mom again, more out of fear now. She was freaking out, and told me to, no matter what, not open the door. I didn't. I told him through the door, "I'm sorry, but we're kids and can't have anyone over." He just kept saying the same things. "I'm a doctor, I promise I'm a doctor, you can trust me, I'm friends with your mom," and kept banging on the door for a solid minute or more, before eventually leaving. What a creep.
This happened when I was 18 and worked at a Wendy's. We closed at 1 in the morning, and I was often stuck working the closing shift. A guy I had been talking to, Corey, worked the third shift at Walmart and took his lunch break at 2 in the morning. A few times a week, I'd get off work and go grocery shopping at Walmart while I waited for Corey to text and tell me he was on lunch. Well, this particular night, I decided to bring my digital camera to work and print some pictures off at Walgreens across the street after my shift. I was meeting Corey for his lunch break, so I had some time to print pictures for a scrapbook I was making. After work, I drove to Walgreens and sat at the photo kiosk. While I was trying to decide which pictures I wanted, I felt someone come up behind me. This wasn't especially weird since I knew most of the staff at Walgreens, but it wasn't anyone I knew. I looked over my shoulder and saw this guy just staring at my pictures on the screen. I said, "What's up?" thinking maybe he knew someone in the pictures. Creeper Man continues to stare and then asks, "Is that your boyfriend?" I tell him no, those were my friends. In one of the pictures, I am kissing my friend Cody on the cheek. He points to it and says, "Well, he sure looks like your boyfriend." Again, I say no, that is my friend, and we were just taking a fun picture. Creepy Man continues to look over my shoulder, so I just tried to ignore him. I used to compete in pageants, and one of my competition photos was now on the screen. "Have you ever thought about modeling?" he asks. I tell him no, pageants were just a hobby. He starts going on and on about how beautiful I am, and I still try to shrug it off, but then he puts his hand on my shoulder and asks me to print him off a picture of me. And I swear, I thought I felt him sniff my hair. What the fuck? So I get my prints and I tell him to have a good night. I decided it was best that I hang out in Walgreens rather than leave, in case he follows me. So I started browsing around the store pretending to look for stuff that I didn't need. He tries to follow me, peeking around corners and then jumping back behind aisles when I make eye contact. This was really freaking me out, so I make my way to the front of the store, ready to make a run for it. He stands in front of me and starts asking about all these horror movies like Psycho and the like. I tell him no, I've not seen any of those movies and decide it's time to get some help. I tell him I've just remembered I needed to ask the pharmacist a question about my new medication. He started to ask, "Oh, what medication?" And I cut him off and said goodnight again. I get to the back and lo and behold, my favorite pharmacist, Sam, is working. I used to be on several medications, so Sam knew who I was. I tell him he needed to act really engaged and stay at the window for a minute. He asks who the man in the aisle behind me was, so I tell him what's up. Creeper decides to creep up closer and closer, and Sam tells him, "Sir, you're going to have to stay behind the line while I'm with a patient." Creeper decides to head back to the front of the store, so Sam and I chat as he does some paperwork. Eventually, Sam picks up the phone to call the cashier and asks if the weirdo is out of the store. She tells him yes and asks why. She feels horrible because she thought we were friends. He told her we were friends and that he was giving me some privacy while I talked to the pharmacist. I wait a little while longer before I go out to my car. The cashier watches me drive off. I decide to just drive around town in case I am being followed. This fucker already knew where I worked, and I wasn't about to let him know where I lived. He actually came into Wendy's a few times after this, but my boss would let me hide in the back when he came. So thanks, Sam the pharmacist, and creepy photo kiosk lurker. Let's not meet.
What's up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you for watching the video, especially if you made it this far to the end. I also wanted to give a special thank you to my collaborator, Darkness Prevails. He's really awesome, and I've been a big fan of his for some time. He does true scary videos too, so you guys should go ahead and check him out. He focuses a lot on paranormal stuff, so if you guys enjoy that paranormal side of the true scary stories, he's definitely a must-see. So I'll leave a link to his channel in the description below. As always, links to my social media will also be in the description below. If you have any stories you'd like me to read or any personal stories you'd like to send in, feel free to send me a message on any of those links. And if you have any constructive criticism, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. I'm always looking for new ways to improve.